Hey y'all, welcome back. Today we're checking out Noel Gallagher's insane songwriting technique.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
They just fall out of the sky.
Noel Gallagher has to be one of the most prolific and best songwriters of his generation. Love him or hate him, you can't argue about the success he's had. 8 number-one albums with Oasis, 4 with High Flying Birds, over 75 million units sold. He was the main songwriter of a band that changed the face of British rock. Champagne Supernova, Don't Look Back in Anger, Supersonic, and of course, Wonderwall. He wrote songs that are stamped into rock history forever, whether you like it or not. No wonder he's got a bit of a swagger about him. But how on earth did he do it? We're not arrogant, we just believe we're the best band in the world. These words have long been quoted by Noel Gallagher, and it really sums up his attitude.
Y'all be sure to go to Music Mongoose and like and subscribe. And maybe pick up a shirt. I got some merch. Show me on a map, because I say that a lot. But y'all, I thought Noel Gallagher's songwriting technique was basically just look at a Beatles song and change the words. Maybe I'm wrong. Let's see what he does.
But to find out how he writes these songs, we've got to go back and look at who came before him. See, Noel is heavily inspired by guys like Bob Dylan, Keith Richards, and of course, the Beatles.
Okay, thank you.
So it's not surprising that when he approaches his songs, he follows some of their techniques. Now, I'm mainly going to talk about Bob Dylan's approach in this video because Noel Gallagher definitely took a leaf out of his book. Many called Bob Dylan the voice of a generation, and for good reason. But his songwriting technique was quite unique. Dump now, edit later. This approach is often used by authors, directors, and playwrights. Essentially, it's the practice of just writing everything that comes into your head, whether it's brilliant or rubbish, and then piecing it together afterwards to make a sort of cohesive result at the end. Right. Now, this process was heavily encouraged by poet and friend Allen Ginsberg, who even went out on tour with Dylan in 1965 and helped him a lot with his songwriting process. Dylan would fill stacks of notebooks with scraps of lyrics, random thoughts, ideas, and notes for himself. Looking at them now, a lot of the time they resemble nothing like someone writing a song. They resemble more of a diary than lyric sheets. He would create a narrative of an idea and then pick songs out of it. But why am I talking about someone who was doing this 30 years before Noel Gallagher? Well, here's 2 pictures. And you can see the similarity, can't you? Noel Gallagher used a really similar approach. He would write down different sets of lyrics, often crossing them out, lifting a line here, dropping a bridge there, until the finished song was an amalgamation of not quite right parts.
That's interesting. I've heard of this technique before, and I've used it before. Not that I've written any great songs, but with any art, really. Anything where you're like writing, creating, it's like a brainstorm. You just crap it out. Just crap it out as much as you can. Whatever comes to your mind, just get it out in the physical world, right? And then you go back, maybe a day later. It's good to sleep on it, I think. But a day later, a little while later, and you take the best parts of it, right?
Chop and change and move around his lyrics of not quite right parts. He would chop and change and move around his lyrics until it just felt right. But lyrics are, of course, only one part of a song. He has that knack for making songs that just sound so right. And that's because that's the most important part for Noel Gallagher. He's always said that it's the melody of a song that people remember, not the lyrics. And
That's interesting, too. I know some songwriters, like Paul McCartney, they will have a melody come to mind, which feels like it comes from another place, and they'll just say words that it's mostly gibberish, and then eventually lyrics have come out of that, and then it takes some time to sharpen them, make them make sense. That's what I've heard.
He takes this approach, melody of a song that people remember, not the lyrics. And he takes this approach with his songwriting.
I've also heard Max Martin does that, who has the most #1 hits of any single person ever. He's only second to John Lennon and Paul McCartney together. And he also does that. He'll let the melody come through, and he just says gibberish, and then he crafts the lyrics afterwards. And he says that the lyrics don't really matter. They have to feel right. So you'll notice in a lot of his songs, they don't really make sense. Because his first language is not English, it's Swedish. So I just heard a song of his recently. The lyric is something like, "You're the one I ever needed." Whereas like someone who spoke English primarily would say, "You're the one I always needed," but I guess always didn't feel right on the mouth or it didn't sound right. So he made it, "You're the one I ever needed." And no one cared. It was a hit song. No one cared.
The chords are nothing in what I do. The chords are nothing. They are completely meaningless.
Come on.
It's all about the melodies, because that's what sticks. Because the guy, when he's going to work in the morning, he's whistling the melody. He's not thinking about the chords.
Well, he's not thinking about the chords, but he's feeling the chords. I think the chords are not meaningless. I think when it comes to songwriting, of course the melody is really important, but the chords are the support. It's the harmony, right? It's the context of the melody. I see what he means, though. He's being like, he's exaggerating the way that he does. The chords are meaningless. If they're so meaningless, why did you lift them from the Beatles?
In fact, he's developed a pretty interesting method of, well, not trying to write a song.
I write without writing. I've developed a style of sitting down, watching the TV with the guitar, playing some chords, and then suddenly I'll take notice of what I'm doing and think, oh, they sound good. And then persevere with that until a melody arrives. And if it's good, you remember it.
And I think this ties in nicely with Noel's surprising lack of any music theory. He's been very open that he was never taught anything musically by anyone.
Oh yeah, you don't need to know music theory to write a pop song. In fact, it's better if you don't because you start overthinking it. It's good to stay a little dumb, right? It's good to stay a little dumb. Stephen Pressfield, The War of Art.
And that he relies totally on instinct and inspiration. He said he finds the idea of musical theory utterly laughable.
I was having this conversation with her and she'd studied musical theory, which I found and still do find to this day hilarious, you know what I mean? The theory of music. What's all that about? Yeah, do you know what I mean? So she was saying, well, for you to come up with that chord, you must have studied musical theory. And I was like, I can assure you, love, that I haven't. I wouldn't even know where you go to study that. I can't even spell theory, you know what I mean? You know.
Noel Gallagher learnt music by loving music. He spent his childhood and teen years absorbing greatest hits compilations of all of his favourite bands. He was a roadie for In Spiral Carpet before he joined his brother in Oasis.
Right.
And all those hours and hours of soaking it all up made music a part of who he is. That's half the secret behind his genius. He's not a genius. He just lives and breathes music. It wasn't a conscious thing to come up with these great melodies. I don't know where they come from. I don't want to know where they come from.
You could say they come from the other side, they come from some spiritual influence, or they come from your subconscious. But if you start thinking too much about it, you don't want to let your human brain mess it up, right? Your dumb human brain cannot even reach the magnificence of something that comes from beyond or something that comes from your unconscious, I think, right? That's what I think.
I get asked a lot why, how, what. I'm not interested. It's all magic to me. His philosophy on songwriting is the same as a lot of other greats. That the songs are already there, waiting to be found. He's talked about guys like Keith Richards, who believes that songs are already fully formed, that they're floating somewhere in the air waiting to be found. He's talked about Neil Young waiting by the rabbit hole and grabbing the song when it pops its head out. Loads of artists have similar feelings. As Michelangelo famously said, "The sculpture is already complete within the marble block before I start my work." As for Noel himself, he likes to call it fishing for a song.
We all think that songs are there fully formed, and I'm just in the river fishing. Sometimes you get one and sometimes you don't, you know. And but if you're not fishing, you know, Bono's going to get it, or Chris Martin.
What I think is funny is that Noel's openly admitted he's not a very good guitar player. He learnt by trying to play along to his favourite songs, and when he realised he wasn't that good, ended up coming up with his own stuff. He'd even experiment playing other people's songs with the chords in the wrong order, just to see what it sounded like. And he ended up writing some of the biggest songs ever with this nonchalant attitude. Which is amazing when you really think about it. In fact, he's also said he's glad Oasis never had the guitar hero character, saying he played simple solos that were more about being right and fitting the song, and that anybody could play, rather than being this guitar maestro.
Yeah. All that noodly guitar stuff, I think it turns most people off. I think he's right. If you listen to a David Gilmour solo, you can hum it, and that's what makes him great, I think. His melody, right?
That's not to say he didn't use some clever tricks, though. He'd do all sorts of stuff, even recording guitars backwards and overdubbing them to give the song more texture and atmosphere. And despite claiming to be not very good on the guitar, he's a master at building layers. He combines acoustic and electric guitars with subtle lead lines and touches to give things emotion. It's simple stuff, but it's done brilliantly. So that's the bones of how he writes songs. But let's look at some examples of it in action. So, Supersonic, the debut single for Oasis. But also, it's a perfect example of Noel's songwriting approach. Firstly, the guitar work on it is exactly how he describes. There's absolutely nothing flashy going on. It's 4 chords, a catchy tune, and a really simple solo that gets stuck in your head. But the other reason this is a good example of how he worked is how quickly he and the band wrote and recorded this song. It took just one night, in fact, or even less than that. The way Noel tells it is the boys had gone out to get a takeaway, he ducked into a back room in the studio, and claims he wrote Supersonic in however long it takes 6 other guys to eat a Chinese meal. He showed the band, they all jumped on their instruments, and that was that. Written, recorded, and mixed that night. Nice. And it's textbook Oasis, nothing out of place, just a simple song that gets you moving. And talk about pulling a song out of the river. Fun fact, actually, Noel has said that the lyrics to that song really aren't about anything. It's just a bunch of stuff that sounded good. Dump now, edit later.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, totally. I have more respect for Noel Gallagher now. I reacted to a video of him a long time ago where he admitted that he lifted something from the Beatles, and from then I started respecting him. I still needle him about lifting from the Beatles a little bit. But, you know, this is making me respect him more.
Other early hits shows how he wasn't afraid to take inspiration from others as well, and that songs can come from unexpected places. Live Forever was one of the first songs Noel wrote for Oasis. It actually started way back in 1991, after a work injury suddenly gave him much more spare time. And that's when he started playing around with the Rolling Stones song Shine a Light. He took the melody and fitted his own lyrics to it. That became the intro of the song. And if you play them back to back, you can really hear the similarity. And actually, I think you can really hear Keith Richards' influence in Noel's guitar playing in that song, if you listen for it. And now for my favourite Oasis song of them all, The Master Plan. Noel wrote this as a B-side for the Wonderwall single. I don't think we really need to go over Wonderwall in this video because it's been done to death. But anyway, it wasn't included on their 1995 hit album What's the Story Morning Glory, and Noel says that it was his biggest regret out of any of the songs not to be included. He said it was a sheer stubbornness at the time. He'd written it as a B-side, so it would stay as a B-side. But it's one of his favourites. And sticking with B-sides, Acquiesce is another one that perfectly shows how Noel's songwriting was pure instinct and feel. That song came about because of a delay on the train to a recording session in Wales. Bored, Noel sat there humming a tune over and over. And it must have just stuck out to him, because he latched onto it and came up with lyrics and music, and suddenly it was there, fully formed. I think you're probably starting to see the trend here. Noel is lightning in a bottle. When inspiration strikes, he grabs it. And of course, he didn't stop being a brilliant songwriter after Oasis. His efforts with the High Flying Birds have been almost as successful, if maybe not shouted about as much as the Oasis stuff. I think here he's a victim of the sheer success of Oasis. The diehard fans were never going to show the same love to whatever came after that. And he knows that perfectly well as well. I've seen interviews where he compares himself to going to a Paul McCartney show and saying, we're all here for the Beatles songs, not Wings. But the sales don't lie. 4 #1 albums for High Flying Birds. Another massive influence I didn't mention in this video was Lee Mavers of The Lars. In fact, Noel famously said Oasis was going to finish what The Lars started. Here's a video that goes into detail on There She Goes, and also why The Lars disappeared altogether.
Yo, I reacted to a video about that. Be sure to check it out, maybe. That's interesting. Yeah. I guess I do have issues with Oasis lifting chord progressions from the Beatles and other people. But now that I know that he's like kind of whatever about it, I respect that a lot more, because that's kind of part of his technique. He's like, take it, it comes, da-da-da, let it go, da-da-da. Like I respect that. He's not laboring over it. There's one Oasis song where he basically uses the chord progression from that John Lennon song Imagine, and you can't copyright a chord progression, but I could see how he just used that chord progression and he put his own melody on it. That's fine. I'm okay with that. So High Flying Birds have had 4 #1 albums. I didn't know he had so much success with them. Let me just look at them on Apple Music real quick. Noel Gallagher's High Flying Birds. Oh, okay. Oh, it does sound like Coldplay. It does. Let's hear the latest one. Dead to the World. Beautiful. Wow. Good sounding songs. I like what Noel said about how it's like fishing. And you're just in the river fishing. And sometimes you get lucky and sometimes you don't. But you got to be in the river fishing, or else Chris Martin's going to get it. That's funny. This is fascinating. Mr. Gallagher, I know you're watching this, and I would like to apologize for any critical comments I've made in the past about lifting chord progressions from the Beatles. It's something I'm struggling with still, but I regret. Anyway, I'd like to say thanks to my patrons. Thanks to my Buy Me a Coffee folks. Thank you all for watching this with me, and I'll see you next time. Later.